The night was thick as velvet, studded with sparse but brilliant stars over the suburb of Ridgewood. Marcus M.J. Jones, a decorated Special Forces veteran, a retired corporal, drove his old but reliable Ford Crown Victoria down Central Avenue. Quiet jazz played in the cabin, and Marcus, slightly tired after a long shift at the warehouse, anticipated the warmth of home, the smile of his wife Sarah, and the sleepy whisper of his 4-year-old daughter Lily. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, seen hell, and returned to build a new life. A life where shooting was a distant, painful memory, not daily reality. He turned onto his street when a bright beam of light hit his rearview mirror. Blue and red flashing lights cut through the darkness. At first, Marcus didn't think much of it. Maybe someone was speeding. But when the light lingered and a siren briefly wailed, he knew it was for him. Damn, Marcus muttered quietly. He checked his speed. He was driving legally. Rear light seemed to be working. Nevertheless, he professionally, without sudden movements, pulled over to the shoulder, lowered his window, and placed his hands on the steering wheel, palms up. This was standard protocol, what he had been taught to avoid misunderstandings. 2 officers emerged from the patrol car. The senior one, Sergeant Miller, a tall, burly man in his 50s, with a stern gaze and noticeable graying, approached the driver's side. His partner, young Officer Rodriguez, barely 30, with a nervous expression, kept his hand on his holster, slowly circling the car from the passenger side. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said calmly. "How can I help you?" Miller didn't answer immediately. He leaned in, and his eyes seemed to bore through Marcus. "Documents, driver. And keep your hands visible." "They're on the wheel, officer," Marcus confirmed, maintaining his composure. "May I retrieve my documents?" "They're in my wallet, in my back pocket." Miller squinted. Steel entered his voice, slowly, very slowly, and no sudden movements. "Understood, officer." Marcus slowly, as if in slow motion, reached his right hand towards the back pocket of his jeans. He felt the tension in the air thicken. At that moment, as his fingers brushed the leather of his wallet, Miller suddenly tensed. "Hands!" he barked, and his hand darted towards his holster. "What are you hiding there, kid?" "Officer, it's my wallet." Marcus's voice remained even, but everything inside him tightened. "I told you I'm getting my documents." But Miller seemed to have already made up his mind. His eyes widened. He saw not a wallet, but a threat. Perhaps he saw the shadows of his past encounters, where a second of delay cost a life. Perhaps he saw in Marcus's dark figure only a stereotype, not a man who had just returned home to his family. "Gun!" Miller shouted, and his words drowned in the roar of gunfire. The first bullet struck Marcus in the left shoulder. Burning pain shot through him, but it didn't paralyze him. This was not the kind of pain that knocks you down, but the kind that awakens instincts honed by years of training. He heard more shots. Rodriguez also opened fire, echoing his partner. A second bullet pierced the car door and grazed Marcus's thigh. He felt something hot and sticky flow down his leg. The world narrowed to a single moment. Fire, pain, threat. The veteran, who had sworn never to shoot again, suddenly found himself in the midst of a new, senseless war. His mind, warped by shock and adrenaline, discarded all civilian conventions. Only one goal remained: survive. In the trunk of his Crown Victoria, in a special safe, lay his personal handgun legally acquired, with a concealed carry permit. But it was too far. However, under the seat, just in case, lay a compact Glock 19, which he carried for self-defense, having all the necessary documents for it. Marcus, doubled over in pain, instinctively ducked down, his right hand fumbling for the familiar cold metal. He drew the pistol. The officers' voices merged into a single, distorted scream. They continued to fire, their bullets tearing through the car's upholstery. Marcus straightened, despite the searing pain, and his hand, steady and sure, raised the pistol. He wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming to stop. He aimed at the silhouettes, at the legs, at unarmored parts of the body. Too quick, precise shots. One into Miller's chest, who suddenly froze, then collapsed to the ground. The second into Rodriguez's leg, who cried out and fell, clutching his thigh. Silence. Eerie, deafening silence, broken only by Marcus's own heavy breathing and the groans of the wounded officers. Blood streamed down his shoulder and leg. He was wounded, but alive. And he had just shot police officers. Panic seized him. This wasn't Afghanistan. This was Ridgewood, his home, his street. He looked at the wounded officers, at their pistols lying on the ground. He could have taken them, could have finished them off, but that wasn't him. He was a soldier, not a murderer. The instinct for self-preservation, honed by years in a combat zone, took over. He had to disappear, now. He started the car, barely holding the wheel. With a screech of tires, the Crown Victoria sped away, leaving behind two wounded officers and a bloody trail on the asphalt. The first sirens pierced the night silence just minutes later. News of the police shooting spread through Ridgewood like wildfire. Sergeant Miller was in critical condition. Officer Rodriguez was wounded but stable. The vehicle description was broadcast to all patrols. Marcus, barely holding the wheel, knew he had little time. He couldn't go home. Sarah and Lily would be in danger. He swerved off the main roads, winding through dark alleys, trying to throw off his pursuers. The pain coursed through his body, but the adrenaline still numbed it. He remembered an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town where his father used to work. There was a hideout they used as kids. It was the only safe place that came to mind. Meanwhile, the city sprang into action. Police cordons appeared everywhere. The chief of police, David Shaw, announced a full-scale operation to apprehend the perpetrator. The media, like vultures, descended on the scene, snatching every word, every scrap of information. Heroic officers attacked. The headlines screamed, "Dangerous criminal at large." No one knew the criminal was a war veteran who had just endured his own tragedy. Marcus reached the warehouse. He parked the car in the shadow of the trees, trying not to leave tracks. Inside, it was cold and damp, but it was shelter. He tore his shirt, trying to bandage the wounds, but blood continued to seep. Fever was slowly creeping in. He took out his phone. The only call he could make was to Sarah. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Listen to me carefully. I'm okay, but I need you to stay home. Don't open the door to anyone. Understand?" "Marcus, oh my God, what happened?" "I heard sirens. What's going on?" Her voice trembled with fear. "I can't explain now. Just know I love you and Lily. And I'll be back. Stay safe." He hung up before she could ask more questions. He knew he was putting her in danger, but he couldn't let her get caught up in this. At the police station, Detective Ana Garcia, head of internal investigations, began her own inquiry. She was known for her integrity and intolerance for bias. The body camera footage from the officers was the first thing she requested. What she saw chilled her. Sergeant Miller, known for his harshness and sometimes racist tendencies, was aggressive from the start. His commands, his shots, they were premature. Marcus Jones, according to the footage, was indeed reaching for his wallet, and he was wounded before he returned fire. Garcia knew this case would tear the city apart. On one side, wounded officers, on the other, a black veteran who had possibly acted in self-defense. She knew most would want to see Marcus Jones as a monster, but Garcia saw a man driven to desperation. Chief Shah, however, had already taken his position. "Detective Garcia," he said, his voice cold, "we need this man. He shot my officers. This is attempted murder. No excuses." "Sir," Garcia countered, "there are questions about how this stop began. The footage shows he pulled a gun and shot my men." Shah slammed his fist on the table. "He's armed and dangerous. Find him." The next 24 hours were hell for Marcus. His wounds festered and the fever worsened. He was dehydrated and hungry. His army training helped him survive, but his body was failing. He knew he needed help. He remembered his old Army friend, Sergeant Mike O'Connor, who lived in a neighboring state. Mike was the only one he could trust. He dialed Mike's number, barely holding the phone. "Mike, it's MJ. I need help. I'm wounded." Mike, recognizing his friend's voice, asked no unnecessary questions. He knew Marcus, knew he'd never ask for help unless he was at his limit. "Where are you, buddy?" Marcus gave the warehouse address. Mike promised to be there in a few hours. Meanwhile, in Ridgewood, public opinion began to split. Civil rights activists, learning of Marcus Jones's identity and military service, began organizing protests. "Justice for MJ," they chanted. "Stop police brutality." The media, gaining access to leaks from body cameras likely from someone in Garcia's department, began publishing edited, but still indicative, fragments. It was clear how Miller provoked, how Marcus reached for his wallet, and how the officers shot first. This caused a storm of public outrage. Sarah Jones, Marcus's wife, made an emotional statement to reporters. "My husband is a hero. He served this country. He's not a criminal. He would never shoot anyone without reason. He was wounded. They shot him." Sergeant Miller remained in a coma. Officer Rodriguez, recovering from surgery, was questioned by Garcia. He was shaken by the incident and admitted that Miller had been too aggressive. I just followed him," Rodriguez said, trembling. "I thought Marcus was reaching for a gun." Miller shouted, "Did you see him reaching for a wallet, officer?" Garcia asked. Rodriguez looked down. I don't know. It all happened so fast." Garcia's investigation was in full swing, but she felt obstructed. Chief Shaw pressured her, demanding Marcus's immediate arrest. He didn't want the story of police brutality to overshadow the story of wounded officers. Mike O'Connor arrived at the warehouse under cover of night. He was stunned to see Marcus's condition. "God, MJ, you look like hell." He quickly administered first aid using his Army skills. "What are you going to do?" Mike asked. "You can't hide forever." "I know," Marcus replied. "I need the truth to come out. I can't let them turn me into a monster." Part IV. The public trial. Marcus made a decision. With Mike's help, he contacted a prominent civil rights attorney, Elijah Greenwood, who was already actively commenting on the case in the media. Greenwood agreed to represent him. The next morning, Marcus Jones, limping and pale, accompanied by Mike and Elijah Greenwood, surrendered to authorities on the steps of the city courthouse, surrounded by dozens of journalists and protesters. His appearance was dramatic. He raised a hand to silence the noise, and his voice, though weak, rang clear. "I am not a criminal. I am a veteran. I defended myself. I demand justice." Marcus Jones's arrest marked the beginning of the most high-profile legal battle in Ridgewood's history. The prosecutor sought charges of attempted murder of 2 police officers. Greenwood insisted on self-defense. The trial lasted several weeks. Testimony, ballistic reports, psychological profiles, everything was laid bare. The officers' body cameras became the main evidence. The footage was replayed again and again. Attorney Greenwood skillfully pointed to Miller's aggression, to Marcus's compliance with instructions, and to the fact that he was wounded first. He presented medical reports confirming Marcus's injuries. Sergeant Miller, barely conscious, testified, but his version of events diverged from the reality captured on the cameras. He claimed Marcus had reached for a weapon first. Officer Rodriguez, whose testimony was more subdued, admitted he was scared and acted instinctively, following Miller's lead. Society was torn. Some saw Marcus as a cold-blooded killer, others a victim of systemic racism and police brutality. Protests and counter-protests rocked the city. Sarah Jones sat in the courtroom every day, her face haggard, but her eyes full of determination. She testified about Marcus's character, his peaceful nature, his struggle with PTSD. The jurors, comprising representatives from various walks of life, were deadlocked. After long days of deliberation, they could not reach a unanimous decision. The judge declared a hung jury, and a new trial was set. But by this point, public pressure, information leaks, and irrefutable body camera evidence began to turn the tide. The Internal Investigations Department, led by Garcia, completed its report. It was devastating for Sergeant Miller. It recommended charges be brought against him for excessive force and unjustified use of force. Chief Shaw, under pressure from the public and city officials, was forced to resign. The retrial for Marcus Jones never happened. The prosecutor, realizing the weakness of their case and the strength of public opinion, offered a plea deal. Marcus would plead guilty to aggravated assault with consideration for self-defense and receive a probationary sentence, along with mandatory anger management and psychological rehabilitation. The attempted murder charges were dropped. Marcus, exhausted but alive, agreed he didn't want to fight anymore. He wanted to return to his family. 2 years passed. Marcus Jones, though bearing bullet scars on his body and invisible wounds in his soul from that night, finally found a semblance of peace. He completed his rehabilitation, learning to cope with his triggers. He found a new job of veteran adaptation consultant, helping others transition back to civilian life. His story became a lesson and a warning for many. Sergeant Miller was fired from the police force and faced trial for excessive force. His case was complex, but eventually he was found guilty on some counts and sentenced to community service and probation. His career was destroyed and his reputation forever tarnished. Officer Rodriguez, having recovered from his injury, remained on the force. He changed. More thoughtful, more cautious. He actively advocated for reforms in police training, for de-escalation of conflicts. His experience that night changed him forever. Detective Ana Garcia was promoted and became the new chief of police of Ridgewood. She actively worked on reforming the department, implementing new training protocols, strengthening oversight on the use of force, and increasing transparency. Ridgewood also changed. The tragedy of that night became a catalyst for dialogue between the police and the community, between different racial groups. There was still much work to be done, but the first step had been taken. Sometimes at night, Marcus still woke from nightmares, the sound of gunfire, the muzzle flash, the searing pain. But Sarah was always there, and in the next room, Lily slept peacefully. He looked at them, and the pain receded. He survived. He fought. And he finally found peace. But the echo of those gunshots, fired on one ordinary night, forever remained in the city's memory, a reminder of the fragility of justice and the price paid for truth.